Welcome to Tao Living, the Art of Living podcast with your host, Lou Corletto, where you will be supported to remember that you are the driver and not the vehicle, so that you can walk your life in trust. Hello, beautiful people. Welcome back to the Tao Living podcast, the Art of Living. Before we dive into today's topic, I'm going to start with a warning, I guess, or a call to action, actually. And that is, if you are not, especially this episode, it's pretty true. It's true for the entire podcast, yet especially this episode. If you're not willing to take responsibility for your life or your health, don't listen to this episode for sure. So, because I'm going to unpack some stuff that requires you to do just that. And so if you are still in victim consciousness where your life or your health is not your responsibility, then this episode's not for you for sure. Cool. So that being said, I'm going to unpack this concept that has been moving through me for years, yet it's refined differently now. I'm still not sure the title of this episode yet, because I'm unpacking this on the fly. But it's going to be something along the lines of learning to speak your original language, your native tongue. What do I mean by that? Well, stay with me. Here's one example. When my grandfather was my great grandfather, born in Italy, Luigi Corletto. I'm Lou Corletto. My grandfather was the first American-born Italian American. Because my great grandfather, when he came over from Italy, did not have a really strong supportive environment of Italians. He experienced some pretty serious ridicule about not being able to speak the language of this country, English. So much so that he made a decision when he had kids to teach them English and not to teach them to speak their own native language, so they would fit into the culture and not receive the abuse of ignorance and all the stuff that happens to immigrants who integrate into a culture and initially don't speak the language. So the reason I share that is, in one generation, my grandfather lost the ability to speak his genealogical native tongue, to where now, a few generations later, my genealogical native tongue is Italian, and I can't speak it fluently. I cannot speak Italian. That's my genealogical native tongue. So if I'm in Europe and somebody starts fluently speaking Italian, I'm gone. Wow, like that's bonkers, right? That is my genealogical native tongue and I can't speak it. So I hope this makes sense. That's the metaphor that I'm speaking to when I'm talking about your original language, and I mean the one from your system, okay? So generationally, you have forgotten. You've been taught how not to speak the language of your own system, your own body. You've been taught to be afraid of it, right? So this is what I mean by speaking your original language. It's not a verbal thing. It's an internal thing. Your system, your bodies, what I mean by bodies is your physical body, your emotional body, your mental body. They're always in communication with you. But we've been taught to, one, just like I don't speak Italian fluently, I don't have command over the language. When I don't know what my body's saying to me, but I have these feelings and sensations, and I don't know how to speak the language, then I become ignorant and afraid, and then I rely on somebody else to translate those messages of my own system for me. Unfortunately, because of, if I'm being kind, ignorance, and if I'm being deeply honest, greed and control, those who are translating the messages for you aren't doing for your best interests. Stay with me, and as I unpack, you'll see why or how, right? So here's another little metaphor, I guess. Just recently, I was flying over to Maldives to go diving, and sitting in the plane before we jumped the pond. New technology on the plane, really cool, like right in your own seat. You can tap into what the actual pilot sees in the cockpit. So like this instrument panel pops up and it shows you airspeed and altitude and wind directions and all kinds of cool things. Now, on the tarmac, meaning before we take off, airspeed is 0 because we're not moving. Altitude was like 15 feet because my chair is 15 feet above the ground, right? And then heading was where we were on the runway. 20 minutes later, altitude's now 38,000 feet. Airspeed's about 550 miles an hour, right? So a direction we're heading east across the pond, right? That's just information. That's all it is. The first information told me about what was going on, right? Full fuel tank, 15 feet above the ground, 0 speed. It's just information. 20 minutes later, it's new information. Why? Because something's changed. The plane's now moving. Your body's always speaking to you. It says this to you at rest. It says this to you in action. Your heart rate's going to be one thing when you're sitting down. It's going to be another thing when you're working out at the gym or running a marathon, right? Your respiration's going to be one thing when you're sitting down. It's another thing when you're running up a hill. It's all information and feedback from your bodies back to you, right? So the point of this is to empower you to understand. Like, I grew up in the typical allopathic model, and I did not understand my language either. So it took me a long time to go back to relearn my native language, my personal language, right? Not the native tongue language. And I've been teaching people for decades how to do that. So stay with me, we'll keep going there, right? Right. So how did this happen globally for humanity? Well, apathy begets apathy, right? If I am born to people who don't know how to speak their own native tongue, then I don't know how to because they don't know how to. And right, depends on how far generationally back your ancestors forgot how to speak their native tongue, the messages from the body. And unfortunately for humanity, it's been a long time, more so for the Western culture. And unfortunately, the last over 100 years, there's been an intentional drive to make sure we don't know. Follow the money, people, right? It's $1 trillion business now, meaning if humanity understood its language, it wouldn't be afraid, it wouldn't be in the dark, and it would trust its own ability to heal. Therefore, the reliance on external remedies, pills, potions, and lotions, would drop off drastically, and that $1 trillion industry would crash and burn. They don't want that. It's a business model, right? So how does that model stay afloat with healthy people or sick people? Sick people, hence the continued promulgation of ignorance of how our body works. Rely on the experts so they can tell you what's going on. So you then rely on these external remedies of pills, potions, and lotions. Hey, if that works for you, keep it up. I'm not here to take that away from you. I'm here to offer a different paradigm to help you remember your original language. So if you choose not to want to do that, but you don't know how to not use that model, there is another way, right? And so here's the introduction to that other way. Real simply, if you look at the current healthcare model, right, which, remember, there's no health in that model. It's a crisis and sickness care model. It's what it's based on. It's just called healthcare, oxymoronic. The high majority, I don't know what the number is, let's call it 90+% of all diagnoses deal with something simply is called hypo and hyper. That just means lower or more than of so-called normal, right? So pulse rate, heartbeat, bradycardia, slow, tachycardia, high, sugar, insulin, right? So glycemia, sugar, not insulin, sugar, not enough, hypoglycemia, too much, hyperglycemia, right? So all these fancy diagnostic medical terminologies they're just simply going, there's less than or more than. And then the procedures are to bring you back into so-called normal. But why is your body doing less than or more than to begin with? Well, that never gets handled. It's just looking at the symptom and then treating the effect of the symptom instead of getting to the imbalance. When you learn to translate the messages of your body, you get to the root cause because it's teaching you something. Why is your system out of balance? Why is there this challenge going on? No matter how it shows up, right? In the form of a headache. Well, I have a headache. Well, why do you have a headache? Is it because you're not drinking enough water, which is most people? Is it because you are in a toxic relationship? Is it because you're eating crappy toxic food? Is it because you're in a toxic environment, right? You're at a job you don't like. There's all kinds of reasons that your system gives you, hello, knock, knock, knock. You're not malfunctioning. So some simple, I'm going to really bring this down to such a stay with this because it's going to sound so, it is basic and I'm doing it on purpose to really make a point. How absurd it's gotten, right? So if you're thirsty, you drink. If you're hungry, you eat. If you're tired, you sleep, right? Duh. But how do you know you're thirsty? Oh, because your body gives you signals like dry throat. Maybe you're tired. Maybe you do have a headache. It's like, oh man, I'm dehydrated. Drink water. Cool. Resolved. I have this feeling in my belly. What is that? Oh man, I'm hungry. Eat. That's feedback loop, appropriate action, resolution. Cool. It's really that simple. But if I have pain in my joints, I don't know what that means. So I go to somebody and they tell me I have a label. It's called arthritis. Inflammation of a joint. Jointitis is inflammation. So, well, here, take these anti-inflammatories. Okay, but do I have arthritis because I wasn't taking the anti-inflammatories? Well, of course not. Well, then why is it going to go away when I take them? It's not. Just changes some of the symptomatology, but it never changes why I created arthritis in the first place. So now I'm not engaged in the communication of my system. I'm not taking an appropriate action for resolution. I'm just treating the effects of the symptoms. Therefore, the problem never gets handled, right? And this is why over time we get sicker and sicker and weaker and weaker. Done, period, right? So how do you change the model? Well, same thing. If we're not listening to, I have this headache, I take a pill, the headache goes away, I feel better. Now we start lying to ourselves. It's impossible to feel better. You feel less. That's how the drug works. No, I feel better. You can't feel better. You feel less. That's how the drug works, right? It's actually blocking synaptic pathways so you can't feel the feeling. That's why it works, right? But it doesn't resolve why. Let's say I have a headache because I'm dehydrated and I take something and the headache goes away. It didn't go away. I just blocked the signals from feeling it. But I didn't hydrate myself, so I haven't handled the issue. Let's say I have a tumor in my brain and I take something. The symptom might go away, but the tumor didn't, right? So I'm not intervening in an appropriate response to engage in resolution because I'm not listening and I'm not translating the messages of my body. I've been taught to be afraid of them, not learn to speak the language. Yeah, that's what's essential. That's what will set you free on so many levels. 1, you'll get resolution. 2, you'll have less fear. 3, you'll increase your vitality. 4, you'll reduce your expenses. Personally, I haven't spent a dime in allopathic or medical care, healthcare, in over 40 years. I don't even carry health insurance because I have health assurance, right? I'm not telling you what to do by any means. Remember at the very beginning. If you're not taking responsibility for your life or your health, don't watch this episode. I'm not here to give advice. I'm here to stimulate you to remember how powerful and amazing you are, and you've forgotten, plus you've been taught to not remember. Yep. Right. So to the degree where if somebody has a migraine now, like we have classifications of headache, it's just headache. And if you switch the words, it's an ache of the head, which is a message. Oh no, I have AM and PM and migraine and this, and is the migraine 2 hours long, 4 hours long? How many? They're like classifications. And what is the number one? I saw it on an ad the other day. I was like, you got to be kidding me. So botulism, right? Botox treatments for migraines, but you have to have 4 hours, multiple days a week, lasting 4 more hours to be eligible to receive this. That's called suffering. If you have something that's beating you down so hard for over 4 hours for multiple days a week, you're not listening. That's intense suffering. Doesn't need to be that way. I'm not judging you for having a migraine for those that might have that. It's not a judgment. It's a call to action saying you're not paying attention, right? The body never goes from zero communication signals to 120. It always does this. If we're not listening, it has to get louder to get our attention. That's simple. Simple meaning that's just the metaphor, right? Your child says, hey, Dad, I want to go out and play. Mom, I want to go out and play. If we listen and go, okay, grab the ball, let's go play. They don't keep sitting there and pulling on your shirt saying, I want to play. We're going out to play. They've engaged conversation. They have the response they want. And now game's on, we're playing. If I ignore them because I'm working or I'm on the phone with somebody, they're going to escalate because that's what they want. They want to play and they want my attention or your attention, right? So that's your inner child getting your attention. Whatever you want to call that, your innate wisdom, nature, the spirit within, your innate intelligence, what you call it doesn't matter, but it's there. Are you ignoring it or are you listening to it? So I've shared this concept for decades. I remember I was speaking at a conference many, many moons ago. And after the conference, I was sitting on the airplane about to fly home. And I had this perplexity of like, how do I get this message through better? Because it wasn't landing the way I wanted it to land. And then since I asked, Spirit gave me a hit. And it was this paradigm shift for me, which was humanity has been taught, right, that everything that your native language speaks is turned into a medical problem. Everything. Fever, that's part of the language, right? A fever. A rash, a feeling, panic, anxiety. That's all information. It's just information, right? They're not labels. You're not broken. There's nothing wrong. It's getting you involved in the conversation. But in our society, it all fits under an umbrella called medical problem. Every single thing that your body speaks turns into a label and it's a medical problem. So in that construct, logically, like this is psychological stuff now, logically, who's the only person that can help you? A medical practitioner. It's a medical problem, medical practitioner. Totally makes sense. That's just good marketing, but it's not true. See, I never got the memo. When did God die and leave healing to one profession? Healing's up to me. Healing's up to you. It's not up to the medical profession. So what if it's not? Here's the paradigm shift. Let's remove it from a medical problem to a healing opportunity. Hey, then who can help you? Anybody you want, anybody you resonate with, right? It's like, when did that become the gold standard and the only people you're allowed to go see? It's not. That's just marketing. It's really good marketing. And I'm not saying don't see, right? Again, there's no advice here. But I'm saying there's whole other worlds, but the first person you should see is, hey, physician, heal thyself. Isn't that the mandate? So you have a choice. You can continue to be part of the paradigm that the world wants you to be, which is a victim. That you're broken, you're weak, you don't know how your own body works, and you need to rely on experts outside of you. Or you can take ownership of your life and your health and your well-being, become a victor, and learn how to speak your native language again, right? And in order to do that, I have a bunch of resources, but there's one that's on the website right now, my website, LouQuerletto.com. It's called Operator's Manual for Your Vehicle, right? It's been there for a while. Don't know how much longer it's going to be there, but go grab it. It's a 4 short video series, which is starting this process further down the road of, if your body's speaking, how do you learn to translate the messages away from the way you've been taught? Yeah, so that's there. And here's a little experiment to see actually who's listening to the podcast and who wants to take an action step in this direction. I also wrote a book a number of years ago called Healing versus Curing, right? Opening the door to a new lease on life. If you're listening to this podcast and you'd like a free copy of that, send me a message, however you want to send that, through an email, social link, wherever you want to send me that. I'd like a copy and I'll get you a copy. So this is a little test to see who's listening and who wants to take action. Yep. And here's another challenge. If you're new to the path, get the resources, right? I have some, sure, and there's plenty of other people out there teaching them as well. If you like the way I present them, grab the ones that I just offered to you. here's the challenge for the next group of folks, right? So if you're not new to the path, if you've been on the path, meaning that you've awoken, you've trusted your body more, here's my challenge to you is, at what level of congruence are you really living it? I watch way too often, and this is a call to action, not a judgment. I watch way too often people who talk the talk, but they don't walk the walk. Meaning, when life is all working, oh yeah, I understand, I'm self-healing and this and that, but the first time crisis pops up in their life, right, they get a hangnail and boom, off in fear they run. And in fear, we end up interfering instead of trusting, listening, taking appropriate action, create a resolution. Different game, different outcome. Yeah. So thanks for listening. As I was unpacking this on the fly, I appreciate you tuning in. I'd love to hear your feedback as well. So reach out and grab those resources. Operator's Manual for your vehicles on the site, loucorletto.com. I'll have the link at the end of this description. And also, if you want a free copy of the book, Healing versus Curing, let me know. We'll get it in your hands. Thanks for tuning in to the Art of Living podcast. Abundant blessings. Ciao. P.S. If you hear this in time, 3 weeks, we have a deep dive retreat called the Art of Living Retreat, 4 days. Now, if you're new to the path, this retreat's not for you. If you've been on the path and you want to take a serious deep dive, join us. There's only a couple of spaces left. So abundant blessings. Ciao. Thank you for tuning in to the Tao Living podcast, The Art of Living. Now go to loucorletto.com, loucorletto.com, to receive your free training, the operator's manual for your vehicle. See, when you buy a phone, you get a manual. When you buy a car, you get a manual. When you entered your body, no manual. Let me teach you how it's really designed to work. Also, help me help others and share this podcast far and wide. And subscribe so you don't miss a single episode. Until next time, abundant blessings.